And as I drive by the 20-acre field, I look out in the 20-acre field and there are 6 weeds growing. And that's all there is in the field. What do I say is in the field?
Weeds.
Weeds. And I'll look at it again, I'll say that's a weed field. All right, now according to our rules here, can I pull them up? No. But there's another concept called dilution. So I'm going to get me sacks and sacks and sacks of wheat. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to plant wheat from one end of that 20 acres to the other. Months later, the grain is waving in the wind, beautiful and golden. You drive by, what do you say you've just passed?
Wheat field.
If I should ask you if you saw any weeds, what would you say? In fact, I've heard people say, what do those farmers do so there's not a single weed in those fields? You should go for a hike in them and look. There are weeds there, but will anybody know it? No. So we say then, by the process of dilution, I can make my whole subconscious into a brand new human being. The weeds are still there. Now, there's an illustration of this. There's even a parable in the Bible of the same story. But the basic reason is, why can't I go into the field and pull up the 6 weeds with my wheat harvest there? In other words, I would ruin the wheat. So why can't you go in your brain and pull out the negativism that you've put in? You'd ruin your brain. Does this show you why the law says everything that goes in stays there? This is tremendous for you to teach your children. What does this do to the whole bit of sowing wild oats? Does it prove you can get away with it? It shows it's impossible to get away with it. And what would cause you to believe fear was powerful? To have some weeds growing in your field, right? Now, how many real estate offices can I walk into if I lived another 1,000,000 years that would have little signs that would help me fight fear? I'll tell you a secret, not as many as the actual fear thoughts. So would I win the battle against fear if I was going to wait until it was solved by nature at random? I can verify this quickly. How much wheat could you harvest if you're going to let the birds sow your wheat crop at random? You see, birds happen to carry more weed seeds than they do wheat seeds. And our society, likewise. It is not hard for me to hear a lot of negativism in a day. It's everywhere I go. But I haven't found much wheat floating around. All the words are poison weeds. If you're going to have wheat sown in your subconscious, who's going to sow it? You are, and you're going to do it in spite of everything else. Not because of anything. Now, is it hard work to sit down 2 hours every day for 6 months and do nothing but solid repetition? To actually accomplish personality change, in my estimation, is the hardest work on earth. If you woke up in the middle of the night with a nightmare, would you be on duty again? You might, for 1 hour before you go back to sleep, do repetition. I have done this in the middle of the night. And you wake up. Just tell myself, well, we're in warfare and we've had a night attack. I set up the cannons and I begin firing, and do I stop? No. I set up a repetition pattern. I allow no other thoughts to enter my head until I'm asleep again. This is what I mean by real warfare. I know of a story of a deacon in a church that had been actually converted 25 years prior. He was a noble man, and one day he was sick. And it was announced at church that no visitors were allowed. And this was not because he was very serious. It was just because he was unconscious and he was talking. Now, the men couldn't go because it just wasn't normal swear words. It was very vulgar. It was the vulgar of the vulgarest. And this particular church believed in a doctrine called backsliding. So their first reaction was, this deacon's going where? To hell. And so it was a matter of serious prayer. Now, his sickness passed, and when he became well, he went back to church and he was the same deacon that he was before. I want to tell you the secret to the whole thing. Between the ages of 18 and 22, he was on a merchant marine ship. And I really didn't know we had any that bad, but we evidently have had. And what had gone into his subconscious for 4 years? This particular stuff that was coming out when he was in the hospital. Now, even though he'd had 25 years of a good crop, was it still there? Now, we're going to go in a little bit later on the actual level between the conscious and the subconscious to show you how it broke through and came on top. But this illustration proves that whatever goes here will always be there. Now, tonight, if I had a tablet here of arsenic, and I would take this tablet, it would kill me. But could I dilute it enough till we could drink arsenic? In other words, if I dilute it enough, we can all drink this tablet and we'll live. This story even bears out another point. Does the arsenic stay in your body? Yes, it does, and there's a limit to how much you can take because it accumulates. And the same thing is true of negativism. But the dilution factor will get rid of it. Now, how often do you use repetition? 70% of your day you spend talking to yourself. This is interesting because you wait a lot of times, you have to take baths, you read, you're alone a considerable amount of time during a day by yourself. Now the next question is, what do you talk about when you're talking to yourself? Now I know that the average person thinks negative thoughts. Is he really using our law of repetition? Yes, he is, only in the reverse. So what I would like for you to do is take the 70% of the time that you spend talking to yourself and spend that amount of time in repetition. Also, when you get ready to go to bed at night, what should you be thinking about as you go to sleep? I use repetition. In other words, I start a certain pattern of thought and I tell myself, this is the last thing I'm going to know tonight. You see the control you have here? In other words, I'm not having any other thoughts in my head tonight but this particular scripture verse. All right, now, after I have blocked, after I have cut, after I have done my repetition, I still have the problem of the negativism that was down here. And I want to show you why it's best not to count on blocking and repetition for the solution. I think the repetition will solve the problem from now on out if you do what with all negative thinking from now on out? Stop it. You'll never get ahead of the game if you continue watching the television programs that are negative. You'll never win the battle if you still read the books. Or if you still listen to the stories, because you are doing what? You are putting it in faster than you're planting the wheat crop to dilute it. Now there's some other disadvantages to actual dilution that we will have to cover to show you that that will not be the perfect solution. Let's call the line between X and Z a pressure cooker cover. And let's let the subconscious be a pressure cooker. Now we say that if I put positive things in here, they do not build pressure. But if I put negative things in my subconscious, it builds pressure. This is the difference between the two concepts. All right, so I'm going to put some negativism in here. I'm going to build up pressure, and it's going to exert itself against the lid. Now, the lid has a direct correlation with physical strength. In other words, if I'm a strong person, I have a tight lid. If I'm a weak or a frail person, I have a weak lid. Let's take an illustration. Here's a gentleman that had taken photographs in the Korean War. And some of these are so bloody that they make people nauseated. But he loves them. His wife weighs about 97 pounds, very frail. She doesn't love him. When he watches TV, it's everything on the entire program for the rest of the evening. she has to leave the room. If she were to watch one of those TV programs, she would wake up in the middle of that night and scream. Does he wake up? Nothing bothers him all night long. He's a very big man, very husky, very strong. Therefore, what kind of a lid does he have on his pressure cooker? Strong lid. Can he put anything in his subconscious and hold it there? And it appears to not bother him at all. On the other hand, his wife, she can't get away with putting anything down here. Because whatever she puts in here bounces right back up in a nightmare, and it bothers her. Now, who's going to get away with it? She's the only one that will win in this battle. I look for him either to be dead or for her to feed him as he'll be some type of an invalid. Because as he gets older, either his change of life or actual old age, will his physical strength ebb? Will he lose the lid of his pressure cooker, and will it come out? When she loses the lid on her pressure cooker, there's nothing bad in here to come out. So we say that she will grow old gracefully. You ever known people who, the older they become, the sweeter they become? They're ripening, that's all. And what they put in here all their life is now blossoming. Back to our deacon in our church. When he was sick, what happened to the lid? It weakened, and out came whatever was below. Now, it isn't just old age that will get you. Some ladies have monthly troubles. Let's get real plain. Does that weaken the lid? Does what's down here come out? And if that won't be enough, then she has her menopause. What's that do to the lid? I know this is awfully hard to talk about because you're thinking of different relatives. I know what's going on in your minds. You said, poor Aunt Sue. When they carried her away to the hospital and she was screaming, are you telling me that she had a subconscious, that that was what she really was? Yes, I am. You might say, well, she was always smiling, and she was so pleasant. Always remember, when they're smiling and they're pleasant, does that have any relationship with what they're thinking? No. If you really want to know what's down inside of a person, wait until the pressure lid weakens and let it come out. In other words, some people don't even have a second childhood. Did you know that? They grow old, and the older they become, the more wonderful they become. Other people become so outright nasty that not even a close relative can stand them. We say then, whatever they put in is coming out. So this would lead me to believe that, well, I get away with it. If you're going to put negatives in there, then you should get a sports car and drive fast. And hope to die while you're still young and beautiful. Because, believe it or not, whatever you put into here will come out. And will be visible to everybody to see. All right, let's take another subject called phobias. Normally, you can identify a phobia by pride. If a person has a phobia, they want to tell everybody about it. And they'll do it publicly. Oh, it could be birds or cats. They normally pick some type of a very neutral object. And they normally pick an object that everybody can identify quickly so that when they express their phobia, people will know immediately what it is they're afraid of. All right, let's look at our diagram and explain a phobia. Let's take point V. If I build up a tremendous pressure in here of negativism, and I cannot tolerate negativism in my consciousness, the actual growth pattern will be similar to this repression arrow. In other words, the negativism starts to come up into the conscious, and we know immediately the consciousness couldn't take it, so it's repressed without the consciousness even knowing it's there. And it's sent back in. Now, does this solve the problem of releasing any pressure? None whatsoever. So in order to solve the problem, we have devised a channel. And we have picked a spatial object that's all right, like, let's say it's cats. Now, can I openly express my fear of cats? Have I a release valve on my subconscious? And also, since I've chosen something that I can be proud of, can I use my release valve anytime, any place? Isn't this quite convenient? Therefore, what should I do if I have a phobia? Immediately conquer the fear of the phobia. All this does is say that this particular channel is no longer acceptable. Your subconscious will cooperate immediately by giving you another phobia. Then do what? Conquer it. And as I keep doing that, am I releasing some pressure here? Before long, you'll find out that things you used to repress are going to do what? Come right straight through. In fact, you can always tell when people are beginning to break the barrier, their dreams become more wicked. I'll give you an illustration. When I was doing my master's degree at the University of Oregon, I had Dr. Roy Buehler for one of my abnormal psych classes. And he told a personal story that he had done in his own career, which I think illustrates the point. Well, all psychologists, when they first learn a little bit of psychology, get excited. I mean, they're going to solve the problems of the world. Here he had this young man he was counseling, and his problem was a rash, sort of pimples across his face. So Dr. Buehler, in dealing with him, discovered very quickly what was the problem. He was just in love with his sister, that was all. And he would discuss his dreams, and he would be having these beautiful sex affairs with this beautiful girl, and as he described her entire body, he would come up to her neck, and there'd be no head. Right? According to our diagram, what's happening? The body is acceptable, so it comes through. Is the head acceptable?
No.
It would make more pimples, so the head is repressed. Now, what you should do in a situation like that is take a period of about a year to condition the boy that all boys have these particular experiences, and they channel them in different directions and solve the problem. What do you suppose Dr. Buehler did? Well, if you knew what was a guy's whole problem, wouldn't you feel great? So he jumped right in and he told him he asked him to describe one of the dreams, and he was describing the dream, and when we got up about the shoulders, Dr. Buehler said, "It's your sister." And before he could repress it, what do you suppose the guy did? He saw. Now, what happened to him? They took him to the hospital. The rash became worse. His eyes swelled up. In other words, the rash had been his form of an adjustment along with the repression, and Dr. Buehler had taken the repression away from him, which caused his other adjustment to carry the full load. Does this story illustrate what I mean by repression and why this consciousness cannot take it all the time? And this is what builds up the pressure in the subconscious. This is why when you begin to release the pressure, that the actual subconscious will be able to feed anything. In other words, if there's not very much pressure here, can I feed freely anything through into the consciousness? Now this is extremely important that everything can come through, because there's two ways that my consciousness can know if I'm sick. These thoughts that come into our consciousness, or dreams that you have, what should you do when you have something negative in a dream or something negative in a thought that spontaneously comes into your consciousness?
Forget.
I wouldn't quite forget it, because is it telling me that I'm harvesting a crop? If you have nightmares, what's going on in the subconscious? In fact, if you can get rid of the fears in your life, you'll begin to dream some of the most fabulous Technicolor travel logs that you can imagine. In other words, it will be a pleasure to actually have dreams. So what I would do if I had any type of a negative dream, I'd find out what it is. In other words, what am I afraid of? What can I do? And then I would use repetition. If I get a negative thought during the day, I throw 10 minutes of repetition against it. If it never comes back again, I let it go at that. What if it would come back? 20 minutes. If it doesn't come back, I let it go. What if it comes back? 40. You say, do I keep going like that until I do 10 hours? Yes. You say, do you play that rough with your subconscious? Yes. Does it play that rough with me? Yes. I consider this all-out war. I consider that you're playing for keeps. And I wouldn't allow anything in my subconscious to be negative. I would so dilute that it couldn't have any more effect on my being. Some days I have awakened in the morning and I've had a buoyant feeling all day, as if something were coming underneath me and lifting me up. I remember one day, it was so beautiful, and I had it all day, that all at once I had a feeling that something great had happened. I mean, it must have been. I mean, it just was one of those days. So I thought back over the whole day. I wanted to enjoy it more. I wanted to find out what really was it that happened so I can really enjoy it. And what do you suppose happened when I gone through the whole day? Nothing. What was giving me this feeling of buoyancy? I had put positivism in my subconscious through repetition, and was it just coming out lifting me? All right, now I'll give you the reverse of that. Every one of you have had this experience. Just before you wake in the morning, you had a bad dream. And it's ridiculous because it's not true. There's no way on earth it could ever be true. It's not even the kind that could happen. But yet, it keeps bearing down on you. It's real. And you keep fighting it, and it's sort of like a cloud. Then it just makes you disgusted because it's ruining your whole morning. Maybe by 10 o'clock, if you fight hard, you get rid of it. All right, let's explain why this is true. Now, we're going to put in a new era. In here, we have the consciousness, and we're going to call this the pre-consciousness, which is exactly between the consciousness and the subconscious. Now, the basic characteristic of a pre-conscious is the fact that your belief level is 100%. And remember, we said that the highest we could go in the consciousness was 97%. Now, I can give you several illustrations to show you why we know this is 100%. Let me give you one. There's a gentleman in this city who actually did not know any Chinese, took records, played them on his sleep tapes, and in 2 weeks could speak Chinese fluently. Now, I know this sounds like something that's very strange and maybe even fantastic, but here's the reason. He was listening in the 100% area. Therefore, did he have any resistance? Then you have perfect learning. Why couldn't he learn Chinese in the conscious level? Remember, we said the conscious level was a protector and almost like a critic. And you say, well, what is there to criticize about Chinese? Well, the consciousness might doubt that it's really a good language, or that funny people learn it. You see, all the things the consciousness could use to block you. But what about the preconscious? Nothing. It just swallows the whole thing. All right, now here's the way it works. I fall asleep. I go through the preconscious, which lasts about 15 minutes. And then I go deep into a sleep that lasts approximately 3 hours. And then I have a cycle pattern like this. In the morning, as I wake up, I come back through the preconsciousness, which gives me another 15 minutes in preconsciousness. Now we're going to call the areas of dreaming A, B, C. And the word we're going to use for this is rapid eye movement. Now, if you want to know whether you dream or not, have your spouse stay awake all night and watch your eyes. When you reach points A, B, and C, your eyelids will move. You're dreaming then. Now, what we want is this rhythm. Now, notice when I first go to sleep, the 3-hour period is the big cycle. By the way, you really have to have this. This is where you get your real rest, your real sleep. And then you go into this circular pattern, and then you finally wake up. There was an experiment that I read not too long ago, which took a cat and put the cat on a little piece of dry land where it was surrounded by water. But the area that was standing on was so small it couldn't lay down. Now, he could sleep standing up, but it couldn't have rapid eye movement standing up, which meant it was sleeping but not dreaming. And what do you suppose happened to that poor cat? It became neurotic. Now, we took the cat off this little island and put it to a place where it could lay down and sleep, and then it had rapid eye movement, and it was no longer neurotic. Now, from this, we know that we need to have dreams, and we need this particular cycle in our sleep. Now, what we want to discuss is sleep tapes, and I'm going to show you how beautiful they are and how they work. The sleep tape goes on as I fall asleep. It plays for 15 minutes and shuts off. Then I go through my normal sleep pattern, and 15 minutes before I wake up, it comes on and plays for 15 minutes, and then I finally wake up. Now, for it to work, I have to have a normal cycle where I wake up without an alarm clock. I'll show you why. What if I should suddenly be at point O, going in a downward direction, and the alarm clock would ring? Maybe some of you have awakened with that unglued feeling where you don't know where you are. Can you see why that's not too good for you? Now, if this is a normal way you wake up in the morning, it means, do you have a regular established sleep pattern? Would sleep tapes work for you? No, because a sleep tape has to take effect when you're in the pre-conscious area. Now, the dream that we talked about a while ago that lasted all morning, that bothered us, where did you happen to dream it? In your pre-conscious area. Therefore, did you believe it even though it wasn't believable? For example, here's a high school basketball team, and the coach had them playing sleep tapes that they would win the state championship. They couldn't believe that they could do this in the conscious brain. He also had them believing on the sleep tapes that every time they would shoot a basketball, it would go swish. They also couldn't believe that in the conscious state of affairs. But because they were in a pre-conscious level, could they believe it? By the way, the team won the state championship. Another experiment that I know of is they played these for salesmen in the morning. And they told the salesman some facts that the salesman could not believe in the conscious level. And all it was a simple statement, everybody you meet today will love you. Now, those of you who work with salesmen, could you get them to believe this in their conscious brain? No. But in their subconscious, in the preconscious area, on the sleep tape, they believed it. All right, now, if the subconscious is thoroughly convinced with sleep tapes that everybody you meet today is going to love you, how are you going to act to people you meet? As if they are going to love you. This is very interesting because people do not know how to act to you until they first check you out to find out how you want to be treated. So what do? The people look at them to figure out now how do they want to be treated, and immediately they find out that you expect them to love you, so what do you suppose they do? They love you. Now what do you suppose happens to the sales?